Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of the LifeCast, brought to you by myself, Jamie Rindal. Today, I am joined with Lowell Hochhalter, the CEO and Executive Director of the LifeGuard Group, and Mr. Carson Hochhalter, who is the Director of the Lifeline Project underneath the LifeGuard Group. And we are super pumped to come to you and talk about something that has been major in the social media world, actually in the world in general. And this is something that while everyone's in quarantine and self-isolating, this hit bigger than I think anybody thought it was going to. And what I'm talking about is the Tiger King. And as you scroll through Facebook, you will have, there's no way that you could have scrolled through your Facebook or Instagram and not seen anybody discussing the Tiger King, discussing Joe Exotic, discussing Carol Baskin, discussing the fact that she killed her husband, discussing you can't miss that. And we're going to dive deep on what people are talking about. And then we're going to talk about why we're discussing this topic. And it's probably something that you missed. And so as the LifeGuard Group and our mission and what we are founded on, we felt that this was very pertinent to bring to everybody. So hold on, all you cool cats and kittens, because it's about to get fun up in here. So Lowell, how are you doing today?
Well, I am doing great. It's great to see both of you and breaking out of isolation, even if it's just through doing our cast from home. So I'm doing great.
Good. Thanks for being here. It's good to see you too. I'm happy you're here. And Carson, how are you doing down there? I hear we got you out of a workout. I'm sorry / you're welcome.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. We were heading into the third round, and I think I was about done halfway through the second round. So I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you working out for me as well.
Yeah, there you go, of course.
Yeah. So, okay, have you two both spent, watched the 7 hours of the Tiger King?
Yes. I'm still trying to process whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's one of those things that once you see it, you can't quite scrape it out of your mind.
I did as well. I binge watched it straight through. And I feel like I need to go get my eyes re-LASIXed because of it.
Yeah, Cameron, who is my husband, he watched it first and he said, Jamie, you have to watch it. And I thought, no, I'm good. I'm not a big zoo fan. I'm not really interested. And then all of a sudden I couldn't not hear about it. It was everywhere. And Cameron was like, you have to watch it. So I thought, okay, I'll start watching it. Well, then I literally for 7 hours lost my entire life, put the kids to bed, and I had to watch it from beginning to end. And I couldn't stop it until I finished it. So I feel your pain on the scraping of the eyelids and trying to figure out what exactly it is that we all watch, but it's everywhere. It is the hot topic. It's the thing to see. I think Netflix did that right, putting that out while everyone was in self-isolation. So kudos to you, Netflix, because everyone and their mother watched the Tiger King. So for those of you that maybe haven't seen it, let's give a brief overview of what the Tiger King is. Lowell?
Well, you've got one guy who wanted to have tigers, big cats, and he did a lot of things with these cats. He did magic shows. He took them around to communities and just showed people the big cats. And he set up some sort of zoo or wildlife experience where people could come and walk through. People could even put their hands in cages and get their arms eaten off, which then all of a sudden this zookeeper became an EMS professional all of a sudden. And so you had that guy, then you had this lady who was opposed to him having his Tiger Kingdom zoo magic show because she felt like he was exploiting these animals And so she set up a rescue refuge that did the same thing. And then there was another guy named Doc who he did the same thing. I guess I feel like I missed out somehow. Like, how did we not know these things were going on? But I guess they were far enough down in a corner from where I exist in real life to where it just was beyond me. And then there was a lot of extra stories that were going on about each of those individuals and their life and how Carol Baskin killed her husband.
Yeah, there's a lot of characters that you meet throughout the 7 hours of the show. And I would meet a character and think, okay, this one's got to be on the more normalish side of the scale. And then you learn about them, and that's just not true. They're just not normal. And they just all have their own little kooky section of the world down there with personal zoos. So Carson, obviously the show, it's captivating. It is a show that keeps your attention. You can't stop watching. It's like a train wreck. It's like somebody falling off of a bicycle. Do you have any idea why you think that is?
I think part of it is just how absolutely far out there it is. Half the stuff seems made up. I mean, at one point, this guy that you think can't get any crazier decides to run for, I think it was governor. And even some of the stuff he did for publicity to get his name out there as far as things he would hand out. Yeah, it just fit. But I think the biggest thing was just that from one episode to the next, really from 1 minute to the next, you couldn't believe that this was actually real. And then they'd throw up a news article to prove like, no, this really happened. So I think, yeah, it was halfway through the first episode, I couldn't imagine not getting to the end of the series and figuring out what happened. I was disappointed to find out that they never did find out what happened to Carol's husband, but I was pleasantly surprised when I saw that the case is opened back up. So even after the fact, I find myself still being sucked in, like Googling different things to find out what's going on with characters. And so, yeah, there's definitely something there. I don't know if I could put my finger on it, but it's just crazy enough that it absolutely sucks you in.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's a show that when I was explaining it to somebody, I was actually explaining it to my parents to watch it. And my dad was like, what, is this like a movie? And I'm like, no, this is like a documentary. This is real life. And he couldn't, it was just crazy. You can't wrap your head around it, but you can't not watch it. So it is captivating. And you see on social media and you see people talking about all the different things, whether it's Joe Exotic trying to become governor and the amount of votes that he got, which was just crazy, or the fight between him and Carol Baskin, or did Carol Baskin kill her husband? Yes, she absolutely did. Did she feed her to a tiger? I'm not really quite sure about that, but absolutely she killed her husband, in my opinion. That's my opinion. You see all of these different things, and everyone is in such conversation about the Tiger King. But there is one thing that I have not seen anybody address when it comes to the Tiger King. Now, there's a scene in there, if you haven't seen the Tiger King, I'm going to just set it up for you. And it talks about Doc Antle's place, who is a gentleman that's down in Florida, and he has a private zoo similar to Joe Exotic. They, birth tiger cubs and do what's called tiger petting, where they take them and people can take pictures with 6-week-old cubs and then move on from there. And it's a celebrity ploy, and it's all that, but it turns in the show, and it talks to one of the women who she says she finally got out. Those were her words. And those are words that we hear a lot in our work when people talk about being in the life and getting out of the life. And she explains her living situation. She explains kind of what was happening. And so for those of us that work in the human trafficking field, whether it's human trafficking is the overarching of, labor trafficking and sex trafficking, it became very evident of what was happening down south there in Florida and the other places as well. But Lowell, so obviously we've talked about how captivating the show is and what we all picked up on, but what the general public seems to be missing. Can you explain, what it is exactly that's happening down there and why you think people are missing that piece?
I think we've become so desensitized towards things that are like that are happening all around us. And you had this young woman at that time, a young girl, who responded to something that sounded amazing. Like, who wouldn't want to go and take care of, baby tigers? I mean, that's amazing. And to be around these exotic animals. But when she got down there, the promise did not match the reality of what she was about to experience and what she did experience. Her living conditions were awful, no running water, the food was very scarce. They were working sometimes 16-hour days, and I think they got paid, I think she said $100 to $150 a week or somewhere in that area. And when we look at that, that is absolutely fits the very definition of human trafficking and exploitation. And we find out as the series went on that there were sexual favors that were used. The doc's house became kind of the gathering place, and who was the favorite. And of course, like you said, Jamie, in the work that we do, all of those red flags were just waving in front, and we saw in crazy real life human trafficking happening in this story. And I was like you, I'm like, is no one else hearing this? This is as blatant as it gets. And that's the way it's happening. And it may not be the promise being offered in an online ad to come and take care of tiger pets, but it might be something else, a great job waitressing in Las Vegas or in Miami or in Phoenix or whatever it might be. And these young girls get there, these young boys get there, and it doesn't match. And I know part of it, they tried to brush off of, well, he's a crazy, he's got a crazy religious, and they called him the doc, and they idolized this guy as their god, and I think they said as much in that show. Yeah,
thank you. Yeah, that's exactly it. Is they talked about down at Doc Antle's place, that girl talks about their living experience, and they didn't have their living experience there isn't as bad as Joe Exotic's place, where there is rats and mice infestation, and they're living in trailers that are like broke down. But in human trafficking, which is what's happening, in one of the places they talked about how they stayed because they were given drugs. So they had a drug addiction and they were fed their drugs to stay, and then they got paid $100 to $150 a week, which you can't even live a week, not even, I don't know how they live, but I guess because they live there. And so you touched on trafficking, and I touched on it a bit here in the beginning, that there's labor trafficking and there's sex trafficking. Let's break that down a little bit and talk about the difference there. Lowell, if you want to talk about labor trafficking, Carson, if you will kick us off and talk about sex trafficking.
Yeah. So, some of the examples that we saw in the documentary, there was actually one part that I paused and rewound a couple of times because it was just exactly what we talk about. And I want to say it was, I forget his name, but the guy with no legs, and who surprisingly, you come to find out, didn't lose his legs to tigers. But he talks about one of the two husbands of Joe. And the reason that this guy decided to come in and be a part was, you later find out, was because of a drug addiction to methamphetamine. He basically used that vulnerability, that addiction, to bring him in. And we talk about that with students all the time. It's those little things. They know how to pry out. They know exactly what they're looking for, those vulnerabilities, and they know how to twist and manipulate those to basically force you to do whatever they want you to do, by giving you that incentive. And so, I mean, by the end of it, he's got this guy as his husband, and it goes so far as to the guy ends up taking his own life, shooting himself, because he gets himself dug into this place where I don't know if he felt like there was no other option. From what some of the other players in the film were saying, is there was no way out. Like, if I were to leave this place, I don't even know where I would turn to. So just those different footholds that they get, and basically squeeze down on to make sure that these people have no other options. And all of a sudden that one vulnerability turns into multiple, and they have no escape from it, and they have no escape. So it doesn't have to be the threat on a family member's life that holds somebody in. It can be something as small as, I have nowhere else to go if I leave here.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that, Carson. And Lowell, when we talk about labor trafficking, what exactly do we mean by that?
Well, there's actually a few different kinds of labor trafficking. There is the involuntary servitude. There's the debt bondage. There's the holding of immigration papers and using an individual to work, do labor, basically be a servant or slave for no money or very little money. And now there's a misconception out there that if an individual gets any money at all, then there's no crime. But that is indeed not the case. That's why in the United States we have minimum wage laws, so that people get paid what they are owed, and there are proper working conditions, proper living conditions, and things like that. But as far as labor trafficking, the only thing different from labor trafficking and sex trafficking is the end game. But quite often, a labor trafficker or predator will jump that line and exploit his victims sexually as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's good to note that they will, it's not black or white, one or the other. Human trafficking is human trafficking, the crossover of both of those. So in our first episode of the LifeCast, we answered questions from students of schools that we've presented the Lifeline project to. And I'd like to end this episode by going through and answering a couple of those questions too. But before we do that, I want to just touch on the fact that one of the things that we talk about with human trafficking, and you'll see it if you watch any advertisement with it, is hidden in plain sight. And, the Tiger King became such a big hit and everyone was talking about it, but nobody was talking about how the employees were being treated, or you even heard how the tigers were being treated, that there was animal cruelty, but you never heard how the employees were being treated. So that's one thing that I definitely want to make clear, is that as this show became such a phenomenon, that we missed the picture of the fact that there is trafficking, human trafficking, taking place at these locations, in our opinion, that is happening. And so just be aware it's not always, you're not always going to see the act of somebody getting put in a car and taken that way as such the movie, portrayed. It's going to be the act of somebody working 18 hours a day, making $140, being forced to have sex multiple times, selling their bodies over and over again, that vulnerability that's being, taken advantage of. And so just pay attention, because if you hear this and you missed that, go back and watch, and it will jump out at you now that we've brought it to your attention. So with that, I'm going to move over to the questions, and then we'll wrap this up. I know that you guys have other things that you've got to get going to. So I picked out a couple more questions from the students that we visited. And one of them is it just girls that get taken? Which I thought was a very insightful question. And I know it's a hot one on the students' minds. Carson, can you go ahead and answer that question for us?
Yeah. I guess to answer it simply, no. It is not just girls that get taken. I guess going right back to this documentary, we see that even grown men are being manipulated into these different acts, whether it be forced labor or sex trafficking wise, competing with others to try to gain favor with whoever, whether you call them the pimp or as they called docs, whatever their language was for God. So no, I think it's really important to make sure that these young boys do know that, yeah, we don't want to put this fear into them, but we want there to be awareness as a cause to empower them, so that they can know that they need to be on guard, and also watch out for their friends, that you're not invincible just because you're a boy or you think you're a big man even. All it takes is that little something for them to really take over, that one vulnerability. So no, it's not just girls, it's boys, it's men, it's women that are at risk. But if we can educate and empower everyone with this knowledge of what to look out for, the red flags, how to look out for your friends, that's just one more step towards combating this and making sure that they don't get sucked into this life.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for pointing out that it's not just boys and girls that this is happening to, that this is men and women. And we see that, plain as day in that documentary that's happening right now here in the United States. So definitely something to be conscientious about. And which leads me to my second question, Mr. Hochhalter, Lowell Hochhalter, what do people get out of taking kids?
What do people get out of taking kids? That is a great question. It is a question that, as a parent, is haunting, and it's disturbing. We've all, for the most part, watched the movie Taken, and I think that's how a lot of people view how human trafficking takes place. And that's not necessarily the truth, but it's not necessarily false either. Most often, we know that our victims are being recruited and groomed without even knowing it on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat. And so the word taken, or somebody that takes kids, or why they take kids, the taking part happens in so many different ways. And so it appears even to just a regular person that this person went voluntarily. Well, they did, expecting something different than what they got. And what does a perpetrator get? Well, they get money. There is a lot of money. A typical pimp with one girl can make anywhere between $250,000 to $350,000 in a year. And so there is a lot of money that is available. Drugs play a big part. And to be honest, psychologically, mentally, there is a part of the population of perpetrators that they simply, that's their driving force, is being in control. And so what do they get? It depends. They get exactly what it is they're looking for. And I know that that's a broad answer, but they're recruiting, they're grooming, or they're taking individuals to get and to fill a need that they feel like is there.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And those are things to pay attention to. It's not always the stranger that just shows up at a truck stop. It could be somebody, it could be family. And so it's definitely something to just continue to educate yourself on. Follow the LifeGuard group page, our website. We'll continue to put out more content for you to just have that knowledge in your toolbox. There's a quote. Lowell, what's the quote about you can't say you never knew, or how's that quote go?
So William Wilberforce, who was one of the greatest abolitionists, served in the British Parliament, and he stood up and he looked at these parliamentarians and was telling them about the thousands upon thousands and hundreds of thousands of individuals being taken over on ships from Africa into the United States. And he could see the looks in their faces of unbelief, not disbelief, but unbelief. Almost like there's no way that this could happen. And I think in a moment of frustration, but in a brilliant moment of frustration, he looks at his parliamentarians and he said, well, folks, you may choose to look the other way, but never again can you say that you did not know.
And with that, you cannot say that now that you've listened to some of these and you've followed our page. So with that, I'm going to conclude this session of the LifeCast. Lowell and Carson, I really appreciate your time. I hope you guys are managing and doing well here in the shut-in as we are in Montana. And I look forward to being able to see you guys again in person. And I appreciate your time, and I hope you both have a wonderful rest of your day. That concludes this week's episode of the LifeCast.